I didn't find out on a Tuesday. I found out on a Sunday, which somehow made it worse. Sundays are supposed to be quiet. They're supposed to smell like coffee and mean nothing. Instead, I was standing in my mother's kitchen, 3 weeks after her funeral, holding a bank statement that didn't make sense, and listening to my brother laugh on the phone in the next room like he hadn't just buried his mother, like nothing in the world had changed. It had changed, I just didn't know how much yet. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I'm 31 years old, I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized firm in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I know exactly what numbers look like when someone has moved them somewhere they shouldn't be. I've spent 8 years catching other people's lies on paper. It never once occurred to me that I'd have to catch my own brother's. My mother passed in late September. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was 64. She was sharp and funny, and she made the best peach cobbler I have ever tasted in my life, and then she was gone so fast that the world hadn't even caught up to the fact that she was sick before it had to accept that she was dead. My brother flew in from Phoenix the day after she was admitted to hospice. I'd been local, 30 minutes away, so I was already there. I'd already been there for weeks, handling her appointments, managing her medications, sitting with her in the evenings when the pain made it hard for her to sleep. My brother, I'll call him my brother, because that's what he is and what he'll always be, even now is 5 years older than me. He's always been the one who got the benefit of the doubt. The golden one, our mother used to say, not unkindly. She meant it as a compliment. He was charming and confident and knew how to fill a room. I was the quiet one who read spreadsheets for fun. I think our mother loved us equally. I really do believe that. But she trusted him in a way that was different, older, almost reflexive, the way you trust someone simply because you've known them longer. She'd made him the executor of her estate 2 years before she died, back when a will was still something she was doing, just to be organized, and not something she thought she'd actually need soon. I was named in the will. We both were. The house, her savings, a small investment account she'd built quietly over 30 years, it was supposed to be split down the middle. I wasn't in Phoenix. I wasn't managing her estate from a distance. I was here, but I didn't fight the executor designation. I didn't think I needed to. That was my first mistake. Assuming that love was the same thing as protection. The bank statement I found that Sunday was sitting in a manila folder in the kitchen drawer, the kind my mother used for everything, utility bills, insurance cards, coupons she'd clipped and never used. I was cleaning. My brother had gone to the grocery store with his wife, or so he said, and I was clearing out the kitchen because I didn't know what else to do with my grief, and at least organizing felt like forward motion. The folder was unremarkable. I almost didn't open it. I opened it. The statement was for my mother's primary checking account, dated August, 1 month before she died, 2 months after her diagnosis, deep in the window when she was sick enough to be confused but still technically competent to sign documents. The balance at the start of the month was $47,200. The balance at the end was $6,800. There were 4 transfers in between, each one to the same external account, each one exactly $10,000. The memo line on every single one read, medical expenses. I stood very still in my mother's kitchen, and I did not make a sound. I know what fraudulent transfers look like. I've flagged them in corporate audits, in estate disputes, in small business divorces. I know the signature patterns, round numbers, consistent amounts, vague memo lines, tight timing windows. These 4 transfers had every single marker, and I knew, with the particular cold clarity that only comes from years of training and the kind of dread you feel in your stomach before your brain has fully caught up, that this was not the only account. My mother had 3 financial accounts I knew of: the checking, a savings account, and the investment portfolio. The investment portfolio alone had been worth just over $200,000 at her last statement, which she'd shown me in the spring, proud of it in the way only someone who'd built it slowly and carefully could be proud of something. I put the folder back exactly where I found it. I closed the drawer. I went to the living room, sat on the couch, and waited for my brother to come home. He came through the door 20 minutes later, his wife behind him with 2 grocery bags, both of them laughing about something that had happened in the parking lot. He looked at me and smiled the way he always smiled, easy, open, the smile of someone who had never in his life expected to be caught. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," I said. I watched his face. Nothing changed. He believed me completely. That was the moment I decided how I was going to handle this. not with a confrontation, not with accusations I couldn't prove yet. I'd spent 8 years watching people confront fraudsters too early and lose everything because they showed their hand before they had the full deck. I was not going to do that. I was going to be quiet and careful, and I was going to find everything before I said a single word. I told him I was going to stay 1 more week to finish clearing out the house, that I wanted to go through Mom's paperwork to make sure everything was organized before he started the official probate process. He thought that was generous of me. He said so. He clapped me on the shoulder and said he was glad I was handling it because paperwork wasn't really his thing, and his wife nodded along, and I smiled and said, of course, happy to help. It was the least I could do. I have never in my life wanted to say something that badly and said nothing instead. I consider it one of the greater performances of my career, and I am counting my entire professional life in that comparison. I started the next morning. While my brother slept in, I sat at my mother's kitchen table with a legal pad, a cup of coffee, and 8 years of forensic accounting experience, and I began to build a picture. The first thing I needed was access. My mother had used the same small regional bank for 30 years, and I knew the branch manager, a woman named Patricia, who had sent flowers to the funeral and cried at the graveside. I called Patricia that Monday morning and explained, gently, that I was helping my brother with estate administration and that I needed to understand the full account history for probate purposes. Patricia, who had known our family since I was in middle school, pulled everything. What she told me, carefully and with audible discomfort, was that there had been significant activity across all 3 accounts in the 2 months prior to my mother's death. The checking account I already knew about. The savings account, which had held $31,000, had been drawn down to $400 through a series of withdrawals, all in person, all during weekday business hours in August and early September. The investment account had been partially liquidated, $85,000 in positions, sold and transferred out with the paperwork bearing my mother's signature and notarized. My mother, in August and September, had been on hospice. She had been in pain. She had been, on many days, barely lucid. I thanked Patricia. I asked her to flag the accounts and make no further changes pending probate review. She said she already had, quietly, 2 weeks ago, because something had felt wrong to her too. I told her she had done the right thing. I meant it. I called my firm that afternoon. Not as a grieving daughter, as an accountant. I spoke with our senior partner, explained the situation in professional terms, and asked if the firm would be willing to take on an informal pre-probate review as a courtesy. He said yes before I finished the sentence. Now I needed to know where the money had gone. The external account number from the checking statement was a starting point. I couldn't access it directly, but I could run it through channels. It took 2 days and a favor from a colleague who does banking compliance work, but we traced it to a joint account opened 4 months before my mother's death, joint between my brother and his wife. The account was at a different bank, in Phoenix. It had received not just the 4 $10,000 transfers from my mother's checking, but also a $55,000 wire from the investment liquidation, routed through an intermediary that had been dissolved the week after the transfer cleared. $95,000. That was what I could document so far, and I didn't think it was everything. On Thursday of that week, my brother came to find me in the home office where I'd been working through files. He leaned in the doorway, casual, coffee in hand, and asked how it was going. Slower than I expected, I said. Mom kept everything, which is sweet, but it means there's a lot to sort through. You sure you don't want me to just hand it off to the estate attorney? Save you the trouble. I looked up at him. Which estate attorney? I asked, completely neutrally. He named a firm I'd never heard of, not the one our mother had used to draft her will, a new one. When did you hire them? I asked. Few weeks ago, he said. Right after the funeral. Figured we needed to get the ball rolling. Makes sense, I said. Can you send me their contact information? I'd love to loop them in on what I'm finding here. He said sure. He left. He did not send me the contact information that day, or the next day, or the day after that. On Friday, I found the second piece. Among my mother's files, tucked inside a folder labeled insurance that contained nothing but insurance documents and, inexplicably, a recipe for banana bread, was a single sheet of paper that had clearly been printed, signed, and then I think accidentally refiled here instead of removed. It was a transfer on death beneficiary change form for the investment account. It was dated July 15th. It named my brother as the sole beneficiary, replacing the original designation, which had listed both of us equally. My mother's signature was on the form. I looked at it for a long time. I am not a handwriting expert, but I am her daughter. I had seen my mother's signature on birthday cards, on permission slips, on the back of checks she'd written me when I was in college, and too proud to ask for help. The signature on that form was close. It was very close. But the pressure was wrong, and the final loop in her last name, which she always curled back toward the left, curled right. I photographed the document. I photographed every page in that folder. I photographed the entire filing cabinet, drawer by drawer, over the next 6 hours while my brother and his wife drove to Asheville for the day to get some air, which they'd told me about cheerfully that morning, not thinking once about what I might do with 8 uninterrupted hours in our mother's house. I wasn't angry. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect rage in a story like this. And the truth is that what I felt was something much quieter and more durable. It was grief, and it was resolve, and it was a kind of terrible clarity, the feeling of understanding something fully and wishing with every part of yourself that you didn't. I called an estate litigation attorney that afternoon. A real one, recommended by my firm's senior partner, a woman named Diane, who had 30 years of probate fraud experience and an office in Charlotte that smelled like old books and competence. I drove to Charlotte that evening and sat across from her at 7 o'clock on a Friday night and laid out everything I had on the conference table between us. She looked at the documents for a long time. Then she looked at me. "You're good," she said. "I've had practice," I said. "Just usually not this personal." She told me what we needed: the original will, the beneficiary change form for authentication, full bank records through a subpoena, and, ideally, any communications texts, emails that might demonstrate intent or coordination. She told me that the notarized signature on the beneficiary form was going to be critical because whoever notarized a signature from a hospice patient without proper capacity verification had their own liability to worry about, which meant they might be motivated to cooperate. I asked her how long it would take. She said, "Faster than he thinks, slower than you want." She was right on both counts. I went back to my mother's house that night. My brother and his wife were already home, watching something on TV in the living room. I sat with them for an hour. I laughed at the right moments. I said I was tired and going to bed early. My brother said sleep well, and his wife said it had been such a hard week, hadn't it? So much to process. She couldn't imagine doing all this paperwork herself. I said I didn't mind. I said goodnight. I did not sleep. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed in the dark and thought about the July 15th signature with the loop that curled wrong, and I thought about my mother in August, confused and in pain and trusting the people around her completely, and I thought about my brother's easy smile in the doorway with his coffee cup, and I made myself hold all of it without flinching, because the moment I let emotion make the decisions was the moment I would make a mistake. The next morning, I told my brother I needed to head home. I said the firm had something urgent, which wasn't exactly a lie. I had filed the pre-probate review paperwork Friday night. I packed my bag. We hugged in the driveway. He said we'd talk soon about next steps with the estate. I said absolutely, looking forward to it. I drove home and I got to work. Over the next 3 weeks, Diane's office filed for a formal probate fraud review with the court and issued a subpoena for full records from both banks. The Phoenix joint account, once subpoenaed, revealed not just the transfers I'd already tracked, but 2 additional wires I hadn't found yet: $18,000 to a contractor and $12,000 to what appeared to be a personal credit card account, both paid out of my mother's funds in the 2 weeks before she died, when she was no longer able to have any meaningful conversation at all. Total documented, $125,000. The notary on the beneficiary change form turned out to be a notary public operating out of a UPS store in my brother's Phoenix neighborhood. When Diane's investigator contacted her, she said she'd notarized the document as a favor for a friend, that she'd never met the signatory in person, and that the signature had been presented to her on a page that already had a date filled in. She provided a written statement to that effect within 48 hours of being contacted. Apparently, the prospect of losing her notary commission focused her thinking considerably. The estate attorney my brother had hired, the one whose contact information he'd never sent me, turned out to have a very new practice and a professional relationship with my brother's wife that predated my mother's illness by about 2 years. They had mutual connections on LinkedIn. Diane flagged this to the court immediately. My brother called me on a Wednesday morning, 5 weeks after I'd left my mother's house. It was early, before 8, which meant it was before 6 in Phoenix, which meant he wasn't calling to chat. "I need to talk to you about the estate," he said. "Okay," I said. I was sitting at my kitchen table with coffee, fully dressed, having expected this call for 3 days. "I think there may have been some confusion about some of the account activity," he said. "Some transfers that might look strange out of context. I wanted to explain before things got complicated." "I appreciate that," I said. There was a pause. "Have you talked to anyone? An attorney or anyone?" "I've been handling the paperwork," I said. "You know how I am about paperwork." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing, recalibrating, trying to figure out how much I knew without asking directly, because asking directly would mean acknowledging that there was something to know. "The money was for Mom's care," he said finally. "A lot of it was cash expenses. Things that don't have clean paper trails. I can explain it. I just want to make sure we're on the same page before anything goes through the courts and makes this into something it isn't." He sounded very calm. He sounded reasonable. He sounded exactly like the kind of person who, if you didn't know better, you might believe. "I understand," I said. "Let's let the attorneys handle it. That's what they're there for." He was quiet for a moment. "What attorneys?" he said. "The estate litigation review," I said. "It was filed a few weeks ago. You should have received notice." The silence that followed was different from the others. It was the silence of someone understanding, all at once, that the conversation they thought they were controlling had never been theirs to control. He said my name. Just my name. "I love you," I said. And I meant it. That's the part that doesn't fit neatly into a story like this, that I meant it completely, even then, even holding everything I was holding. But I can't let this go. You know I can't. He hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a while. The coffee went cold. Outside, it was an ordinary Wednesday in November. Leaves coming down off the oak tree in the backyard. Sky the particular gray that means it might rain later, or might not. The court appointed a neutral administrator for the estate the following week. The original will, the real one, naming both of us equally, was entered into probate without the beneficiary change form, which had been flagged as potentially fraudulent pending the handwriting authentication. The authentication came back 6 weeks later, inconclusive on authorship, but definitive that the signature had been written by someone whose fine motor control was significantly impaired at the time of signing. The hospice records, subpoenaed separately, documented that my mother's condition in mid-July was consistent with significant cognitive and physical impairment. The estate administrator froze all distributions pending the fraud review. The Phoenix joint account was subpoenaed. My brother's attorney, he'd hired a real one by then, negotiated for 3 months before the number came back. Full restitution of all documented transfers, $125,000, to be paid back into the estate within 60 days, along with a formal relinquishment of executor status and agreement that the estate would be administered by a neutral third party through final distribution. He did not face criminal charges. That was the part that was hardest for me to sit with. Diane explained it clearly. Civil restitution was faster, cleaner, more certain, and would fully restore what had been taken. A criminal prosecution would take years, cost money, and potentially end with a plea to a lesser charge anyway. The goal was to make the estate whole. We made the estate whole. I don't know what happened between my brother and his wife after that. I know that the contractor payment, the $18,000, was traced to renovation work on their Phoenix house, and I know that his wife had been the one to contact the estate attorney with the 2 recent practice, because the emails Diane's investigator found made that clear. I know that whatever the marriage looked like before all of this, it does not look the same now, because I got a text from my brother's wife 4 months after the settlement at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night that said only, "I hope you know I didn't understand the full picture." I did not respond. I don't know if that was the right choice. I know it was the one I made. My mother's estate closed 8 months after her death. The house sold in the spring. The savings and investment accounts, restored to their original balances, plus interest calculated by the court, were distributed equally. I drove past the house once after the sale closed, new family already in, a minivan in the driveway. Someone had put a wreath on the front door. I didn't stop. I thought about my mother's peach cobbler, and I drove home. I still work in forensic accounting. I'm better at it now, if that's possible. Not because of the skills, which were always there, but because I understand something I didn't fully understand before. The thing that makes financial fraud work almost every time isn't sophistication. It isn't clever accounting or offshore accounts or anything that requires expertise to execute. What makes it work is the assumption of trust. It works because we extend, to the people we love, a margin of belief that we would never extend to a stranger. We see the numbers and we find reasons. We tell ourselves there's an explanation. We wait for them to tell us. I stopped waiting. I learned to look. That Sunday in my mother's kitchen, with the bank statement in my hand and my brother laughing on the phone in the next room, I almost put it back. I almost told myself I was reading too much into it, that I was grief-addled and suspicious for no reason, that he wouldn't. I've thought about that moment more than almost any other moment in the past year. The version of me who put it back. What she would have lost, without ever knowing she'd lost it. I didn't put it back. That's the whole story, really. The part that mattered happened right there, in 30 seconds, in a kitchen that smelled like my mother, on a Sunday that was supposed to be quiet. I picked it up, I read it, and I did not look away.